Hello, everyone. This is going to be the PodCatZ episode number 2, and I am joined by my good friend Artosis. What's up, Dan?
Hey man, it's good to see you.
It's
I'm
great to see you.
glad to finally go on a show for you because you are one of the guests that I've had on the Pylon show over its long run many times. So I'm glad to uh, come and talk with you in your environment.
Wonderful. So, yeah, it's actually partly your environment too. You named the show after all. I was asking on Twitter what would be a
it
good
was
name for the show. Yeah.
it was so clear. It was so obvious when I saw that tweet. I'm like, oh, this is easy. Like, uh, I'm not normally that good at naming things, to be honest. I let other people name things for me, but I don't know. It's just cats and cast are just too close together. It's just
It really was perfect. Yeah, and everyone got behind it real quick. It was amazing, and I love it. So thank you for that,
yeah,
first
you're
and
welcome.
foremost. And yeah, a quick introduction as best as I can do it. You're one of the forefathers, I would say, of modern esports. You've been a caster in Korea for a long time now, and I'm sure we'll be talking about, a little bit about StarCraft here and there, 1 and 2. But mainly, I want to learn about you as a person, maybe things that you're not so used to talking about outwards.
Sure.
So if you could give us a condensed life story, I guess. Um,
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I was born in New Hampshire. Uh, Very kind of boring place. I'm the middle child of three boys, and grew up with just my mom. Um, since I was like two, it was just my mom raising us. Um, yeah, we grew up like pretty darn poor, and I liked playing sports a lot as a younger kid. I played a lot of video games. I
what
was
sports? What
the
sports?
basketball
Cool.
mainly. I liked soccer when I was a really little kid, but then I found basketball, and that was kind of like the sport in my town that everyone played.
Hmm.
I come from a town of like 28,000 people or something like that, so like kind of a medium-sized town, I guess. Um, so I played a ton of basketball. Got into things like inline skating, like aggressively ramps and rails and things like that. Really enjoyed that as well. Also got into Magic the Gathering really
Ooh,
heavily
yeah.
around that same time. Really played a lot of that. Hit the tournament scene really hard and started playing StarCraft in like 98, 99, that area, just kind of for fun with my friends. And then I broke my ankle really badly. Like I think it took nearly a year before I could walk again. Like I was on crutches and
Damn.
stuff.
Was
It was
that
like
with
turned
a
around, and it
hardcore
was it.
inline skating?
No, actually, I was jumping on a trampoline,
Oh no.
and I don't know if you jump on trampolines much, but we were doing super bounces where like your friend jumps right before you jump
Oh
or right
no.
before you
Yeah.
hit, and then it like launches you. So I was like going real high. And then one time when I came down, my foot just hit my friend's foot and turned slightly to the side. So when the trampoline came up to shoot me, it just snapped
Oh
it around.
no. Oh, that
Yeah.
sounds
Yeah.
brutal.
It didn't feel good.
Whoa, what? And you just fell into the pool? Was there a pool?
No. We weren't trampling into a pool.
Oh.
It just broke my
Oh.
ankle, and I
Okay.
just went, I broke my ankle, and my friend's like, what? And I just like fell onto the trampoline, laid there. I was like, I broke my ankle. Stop jumping. Like, oh my god. Uh,
So
so
you knew right away that it was broken.
I heard it.
Oh God.
It
Yeah,
was
that's
like it
awful.
was loud, man. My foot was literally backwards.
And that was a
Um,
blessing in disguise. The ending of your basketball career. Then.
this was like right before I entered high school as a freshman, and I was practicing. I was like wanting to try out for the travel team and things like that. Like I was really into it. I get very obsessed with anything I do. So uh yeah, the ankle broke and I was immobilized. Um and so I got more deeply into Magic the Gathering and into StarCraft because those are things I could just do sitting down, and
Hmm.
you know that's kind of how that whole story started. So I played both really competitively for the next several years, and eventually just decided to go all in on StarCraft. Um, I obviously I've had a very long StarCraft career at this point, and I finally got to Korea. Like I decided in 2004, I made the goal like I have to move to Korea because I love this game too much. So like it's the only place that you could do the game, especially back then. Um, and so by about 2008, I got to move to Korea. and
That's
I
awesome.
have lived here ever since.
You were a
lot of
competitor though in StarCraft I while in the US. You were very competitive as well.
yeah. I went to the USA finals for StarCraft 7 times, and until I moved, I would have kept making it, but
Mhm.
I moved to Korea, and I represented America twice for StarCraft I during that
Awesome.
time.
Did you move to Korea to continue that pursuit, or did you move to be a caster, or become a caster?
Both, because basically, okay, I wanted to be a pro gamer in the right sense. Like as far as America went, yeah, I was a pro gamer. I was winning trips, I was winning hardware, occasionally some money, getting to travel around, winning tournaments here and there. But a real pro gamer would be playing on TV in Korea, right? So
Okay.
that is what I wanted, and that was my plan. I had started commentating a little bit, and this company reached out to me. They wanted me to move over to be to commentate for them. And so, well, what happened is they wanted me to make content. Just to be really clear, they wanted me to make content. I saw this, and I was like, "This is my chance. I'm gonna trick them to get me over there as a commentator, and then I'm gonna be a pro gamer."
Nice.
And so I was like, "Oh, you want me to make content? Okay, bring me to Korea to do it. I'm not going to do it from my house." And they agreed. And one of the people that I was talking to, not the main boss guy, but one of the lesser ones, I was like, oh, they were going to put me with a pro team to live when I came out here.
Oh, awesome.
For my trial period, and I made him promise that I would have a PC to practice on next to the pro gamers. So I was like, oh, this is going to be wonderful. And I was like at my peak StarCraft skill at the time. I had just won the US Open.
Nice.
I was playing really well. I was very excited for the opportunity. And so I got to Korea, and there was no PC for me, and I didn't get to play StarCraft for the next few months.
Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So
Did you complain? What could you have bought your own or something, or?
Oh, I had no money.
No.
Like I was paid like actually nothing. Like I borrowed I think $500 from my mom and my brother before I came out, and that was all the money I had for like 2 months. And eventually they started giving me a little bit of money so I could eat some food. But I had really no money, so I just basically couldn't play. I bombed out of the U.S. Nationals that year when I was one of the top players in as late as August, but I just didn't get to practice at all. Yeah, and so that's kind of like, from there I basically became a commentator because I fell off the track of competition. It took me a while to save up enough money to get a PC when I started getting paid a little bit more and everything. And StarCraft II came out. I commentate more and more and more. And at this point now, I'm married. I have 4 kids. I commentate. I stream. Yeah, there you go. That's my life story.
That's wonderful.
All the important parts, at least.
Yeah, and I think we'll go back to this because I feel like you are, as much as you are a commentator, you still very much have that passion as a competitor that that a lot of us, like for instance, I don't have that anymore. I've been a competitor, and I feel like I got my share of that. And by the way, I'm so happy when you tell your life story because I feel like there is a parallel world with me in Peru playing Magic and StarCraft II at the same time. You know, like so that's awesome. But yeah, we'll definitely talk about that a little bit more. But first, I wanted to bring this up. I was trying to prepare a little bit, and I googled Stemkoski. Is that how you say it? Stemkoski.
Yes. Stemkoski.
It's a rare last name. I was trying to figure out where it's from. Dude, do you okay? Like, I'm gonna tell you, they have 427 records and only 21 birth records of Stemkoskis in this website, whereas Jones, they have 22 million with 5 million birth records. So there's like no Stemkoskis anywhere. There's like
it's a rare name.
There's like 7 in Brazil, like 5 in Canada or something, and
wow.
And there's like 83 in the US. So yeah, and they don't have a record of Stemkoskis in Korea, but you've just about produced.
This is one of the big centers for Stemkoskis, actually.
No, it is
South Korea. It's kind of funny, actually. Yeah, it's, when they update all the records, they're gonna be like, "What? That's very weird." Because now 4 Stemkoskis have been born here, and 6 live here. So
that's amazing. Yeah, I found that to be so amazing. There's a few in California as well, but I thought that was crazy. Because for some reason I always thought Where is the last name from? Is it like maybe sounds kind of Polish or like maybe
Yeah.
like Russian or something? But
It's a Polish last name. My family moved over, or well, a branch of my family, the one that carried the last name to me, moved here from Poland. So, and it had like 4 more letters in it. It had like an R and a P.
that's probably what it was. That's
And
why
like a
it's
W or
disappeared.
something.
Yeah.
So they butchered it up at like wherever Ellis Island or whatever, wherever my family came through, and this is what we got. Yeah.
That's incredible. So about your childhood then, just to revisit that, in high school, did you like any particular subjects? Were you into anything in particular?
No. Oh, well, high school was really bad for me. Like I really did not like high school. I didn't like school in general. I kind of found it boring. It wasn't what I was interested in. The thing is, I like to learn a lot. A lot of times, like for instance, my other like big kind of passion has always been reading. I just like to read, and so I'd have these classes where they're like, read this book. I'm like, oh, this book's terrible, and I start it, and I just read my own book, and I'm like, reading, but not what I'm supposed to, right? So that kind of happened a lot in high school, where I just wasn't into a lot of what was being taught. I guess overall I liked most things like science. I really enjoyed physics class. I enjoyed calculus and stuff like that. Those have always been things that I've been stronger at. I'm kind of like a more logical thinker, I guess. So while I enjoyed those, I at the same time didn't really put the effort in, right? Like I broke my ankle right as freshman year was starting. And just I go like full into anything I do. So with StarCraft, I ended up practicing a lot through the night. So I would be very tired when I would go to school and sleep on my desk sometimes, and just I did not do well in high school at all.
How was your mom about that?
Squandered it. Well, my mom worked, right? So as long as I was careful and quiet, she had a hard time knowing, because she would be asleep in the night and I could get up and play against Europeans and Koreans and stuff like that. And yeah, so I had to be careful about when and how loud. Of course, when she found me doing things like that or skipping school to sleep or play StarCraft, she got pretty angry. And the thing is, she would take things, because she didn't know computers that well. So for instance, she would take the modem. That's the one thing. That's the thing she really figured out, was like, take the modem, then you can't get online. And so what I ended up doing is buying additional modems and hiding them.
Nice.
So like she would take the modem, and she's like, "You're done for a week," and she'd take the modem, and then I would just be like, I hate you, Mom. And then like she goes to work or whatever, or goes to bed, and then I just take the other modem that I own out and I plug it in, and then I unplug it before she wakes up and or gets back from work, and I hide it again. So.
That's hilarious. Now, knowing this, what's your relationship to like with your kids in this same regard? Are you strict? Do you let them do whatever they want, or can they play any games?
Well, they're still very young, but yeah, no, I'm definitely showing them games and trying to introduce those in a way that is not like too much. Kids can get like really, something I found is they can get really like brainwashed staring at a screen too much. So I try not to let them do like too many games. Like when we're doing games, I sit there and play with them and talk to them about it. Like for instance, my kids really like this is crazy, because like my twins are 3 years old, my older daughter's 8, and then the 1-year-old wants to play, but she doesn't know what's going on. She like presses buttons on a controller that's on and stares at the screen. But like they love playing Zelda Breath of the Wild, and they become so good at it, it's crazy. Like I can't even believe 3-year-olds can play this and run around and kill monsters and stuff. But you know, I try to buy games that I think that they'll like and let them try them out. But I guess we don't play that much, right? Like we probably play a few hours a week of video games. And I don't know, you know, I think you shouldn't go like full in any direction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like moderation is kind of like a key thing. Like if you try to have your kid not ever do something fun, they're just gonna only do that as soon as they have freedom. Or that's gonna be the only thing they want to do. So yeah, I don't know. I try to give them a variety of things that we're doing like that.
And I think that's the best way for them to try and find themselves, right? Find their niche and what they really like ultimately. to be exposed to many things. So I think that's awesome. I think you're doing it the right way in that regard. And now for your commentator career, I guess, because in this regard, you are a trailblazer. You're the first commentator that we had in English. You were talking about even when they brought you, right, and they were paying you nothing. There was probably no money to be made for them. Like, as much as StarCraft was huge in Korea, outside of Korea, it was a very small group of people that were playing it competitively or trying to anyway. So your dynamic with Tasteless, with you coming in as an analyst, and him who he also was a very strong player back in Brood War, right? Like, also a national competitor and whatnot, or at least a contender. And so how did it fall into place that you were to become the analyst and he was to be color commentary? Was that just a happy coincidence, or?
Yeah, so I mean, he was already out here, I'm gonna say 6 months before I was, maybe a little bit more than that. And he was commentating over at GomTV, the Avertech Intel Classic or whatever it was called, right? And so when I moved over, it was for a different company. It was for the company that had the rights to Pro League and to MSL, a different Star League. So it was kind of like almost a rival company in a lot of ways. But I mean, I knew Nick since 2003 and we were friends and everything. So the idea of commentating together obviously came up, but working for rival companies became, a little bit weird, and we kind of felt it out. And eventually we did a few small things together. And at that point, the thing is, we have completely opposite personalities. So I think at first we didn't really have a talk about what roles we would take, but I just am more of an analyst and he just is more of a host. And I think that really, really helps us. It's really hard to get like a couple analysts together and make that work correctly, or a couple hosts together, because then it might be, too fluffy. So we were just lucky in that way, to be perfectly honest. Like, if we had different personalities, this might not have all worked out. It's just we fit together very well.
Yeah, like I was saying, like it's kind of like you are there so early with him that it's not really a thing that might arise organically, right? Like, to discuss, hey, we should have one analyst and one color commentator, because how would you know that's a good formula to begin with?
Well, yeah, we didn't even think of it like that. That actually came up after we were both hired for GSL. That's what they started telling us. They're like, oh, you're the analyst and you're the host.
Right.
And we were like, what are you talking about? We both host and we both analyze. But the Koreans love to do that, right? They do casting trios, and they have actual roles for the commentators. So that's just how they speak about it. And at first we were kind of frustrated by it, because it's like, don't pigeonhole us, right? Like, we both do both, just different degrees.
Yeah.
But that's kind of where that originated, was the Korean broadcast teams telling us, like, oh, that's how it is. Because I mean, even if they don't understand what's being said, they can just look at us like, yeah, we know what's going on.
Yeah, most definitely. That's amazing. All right. Was there any point in time where you stopped playing StarCraft for any period?
Yeah, so there was a few periods like that. All right, so I started playing basically after I broke my ankle. I started playing competitively. That's what, I was playing like big game hunters, like money maps, and just fun team games before that. So I started playing competitively then. I took a break in 2005 for maybe 4 or 5 months, where that year I was in the best form of my life, and I failed it. There was like too much pressure. There's actually a video online where they followed me and filmed me. This is the famous WCG video that a lot of people have seen. And I was in really ridiculously good StarCraft shape. I was like, I'm going to go to Korea off of this. Like, I am so strong right now. And then I just choked. There was like a camera team following me. I got day 9 early in the tournament. He was always my kryptonite. And it fell apart. I played terribly. I lost. And I was really sad after that. I was incredibly sad, because I had this whole career trajectory that I thought I could follow. So I quit for a little bit and played Age of Empires 3 that had just come out for several months. And then eventually I was like, okay, I got to get back to StarCraft. From there, I was always playing until I moved to Korea and didn't have a computer for a long time. And then eventually I got back into playing a little bit, but it wasn't as much because it's kind of hard to come back when you're, I've missed all these tournaments and it just, I was out of practice. But I started playing again. It wasn't super heavily. And then StarCraft II came out and I got really, really heavily into playing. Made it into GSL Season 1 and everything. And then I was commentating so much. We were commentating, I think, 6 days a week, which was taking up a ridiculous amount of time because we had to work on the commentary as well. So it was like an all-day thing. So I was playing some. I was still keeping like a high rank on the ladder and hitting pros and doing okay, but I wasn't super duper active. As we brought other commentators out to help lessen the load for GSL, I got to play more. And then the break that I took, it took years until I took like another substantial break. And that was, there was a patch in Heart of the Swarm before Legacy of the Void came out where they nerfed the Swarm host. And like the way that they patched the game at that moment, it turned into this really weird thing. I was a Protoss player at the time, and it turned into this very strange meta where it was like Ling Hydra against like Stalker Sentry is what it turned into. And I was just like, I can't believe this patch. People whine hard enough and they changed the game, and this is not what I want. And I worked so hard to be good against Swarm hosts. I was actually very high on the Korean ladder. I was playing very well at that time. And when they changed that, I quit StarCraft for a while. I think until Legacy of the Void, actually, I didn't play like any games because I was just very unhappy that all of my hard work was thrown away from people whining to the balance.
It's funny because back then when the Swarm host was announced, there was you had a show back then called Meta, in which I was also a regular, and I remember when the Swarm host came or was announced, we had a discussion on what it was going to be like, and I thought it might be like a sieging unit or something of the sorts. And I remember very clearly that you were the first person to propose that it would be a turtling unit, essentially.
Yeah.
And
No, I remember this very well. Thank you for bringing that up. I saw it. I just read its stats. I'm like, this is better than the Broodlord. You guys think Broodlord Infester's bad? Wait till you see this. And it definitely did turn into that. It was a crazy unit. Obviously poor design and stuff, but
I liked it. Hey, I liked it. I abused it. I think I was one of the first pros to abuse it in that sense, and thanks in part due to your insights, because initially I disagreed. I thought you use it aggressively and you siege, but man, it was long and it lasted long, and it was so difficult to get in there. And to touch on what you were saying also. You're not a person that likes much change, right? Like you're very adverse to change, I would say. Is that accurate?
Yeah, my wife would definitely agree with you, and I think I probably would as well. The thing is, it can be really fun for new patches to come out and figure things out and everything. But there's something beautiful about things not changing, where every single piece of work you do, every skill you build, counts forever. Like, this is a beautiful thing about Brood War, where I can just work on Brood War forever and I just keep getting better. Whereas something can happen like in Heart of the Swarm, where I worked endlessly and tirelessly on how to beat Swarm host play as Protoss, which was very difficult, and it became this really dynamic, fun thing for me. And I was like, wow, I've improved so much and this is so fun. And then they throw out a patch and all of my work is gone. That's it. It's like, oh, I don't like that personally. I know a lot of people like how it freshens games though, so I mean I appreciate it, and as a commentator I actually appreciate it. But as a player with not as much playing time as it once had, once upon a time I practiced 16 hours a day. That's gone. I prefer to have much slower, much more moderate changes to any game because of that, I think.
I find like that's that we're completely different in that regard, but I don't think there's a right way to be, right? It's just different types of people will gravitate towards different things. And how do you find this translates? Because even you just brought up your wife would agree with me. So like, how do you think this translates into your life? Like, does that produce, for example, a lot of anxiety? You feel like, because life is always changing, right? Like,
yeah. Well, I guess. There was definitely a time where I had anxiety. I think as I get older, everything is fine. Like, I'm kind of like, I guess, more confident about being able to deal with whatever comes and to change things up when I need to. Um, like, I mean, life is always very easy if everything stays the same. And I
Hmm.
actually noticed this a few years ago because I do like things to just stay the same and just kind of, enjoy what I'm doing. But I noticed that I was like getting so comfortable for a long time just casting GSL and doing
Mm.
events and all this. And I was like, huh, that's like,
Boring.
got to be careful with something like that.
Yeah, it starts
Well,
too much of
you
anything,
say
right?
boring, but I enjoy
Oh, really?
routine,
Yeah.
right? Like I eat the same breakfast every day.
Oh no.
It's just if I have nice routines and habits and stuff, I don't have to spend valuable brain energy thinking about that, and
Mm.
I can focus on the things that I'm really interested in. Um, if I don't have to worry about my employment, there's something beautiful about that as well, where it's like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, I'll just keep casting GSL, and I can work on these other side things that I like to do and be happy. But I think I've evolved
No,
out of that
certainly.
area to a degree, and
Yeah.
at this point, I'm like, uh, it's good to stretch yourself, I guess, and
Hmm.
do those other things.
Yeah, and I mean, you also acquire a certain degree of mastery. You were alluding to the beauty of that, right? Just like doing, iterating and doing.
Hmm.
Well, I wouldn't call it the same thing because it's really a thing that's actively evolving, right?
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I completely agree. There's a beauty in watching that and doing that. Not an ability that I share so much. But talking about mixing it up, then I have our first video here that I'd like to share with our viewers.
All right.
If it loads, hold up. There it is. So you did some casting at some point for Street Fighter and or fighting games in general, and also for
Yeah.
Counter-Strike. And I was watching it live, and this just stayed with me. It's from an 8-hour video, but I had to find this exact moment because it was just I thought it was just brilliant. So I'm gonna play it real quick here.
Okay.
We got it. We actually knew it was not going to go off, but I didn't know.
That's amazing. So, how was that for a new experience for you, casting those different games? Were you at first averse to it? Like obviously it
Okay.
was part of the package deal, right? Like hey, you got to do all these or something.
Yeah, yeah. So something people don't know because I'm so known for StarCraft commentary. I've
Hmm.
actually commentated like 20 games professionally,
Oh,
probably. It's a huge amount. I used to. Nowadays, it's not as common. I turn down a lot of work nowadays.
I remember World of Tanks. I remember you did a lot
Yeah,
of. Yeah.
World of Tanks, absolutely. I think I became a good commentator at that. I was predicting
Hmm.
all the drafts and stuff. Like, I felt good about that, and
Yeah.
I enjoyed it too. I enjoy doing other games. It's
Hmm.
fun. It's cool to switch it up. I did a long stint in Hearthstone, a long stint in
I mean,
Heroes
you
of
are
the
the
Storm.
first Hearthstone World Champ. We left that out of your
Yeah.
bio.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's that's true. Yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Um, and I've done a ton of World of Tanks. I've done all sorts of Counter Strike. Like Counter Strike Online is a popular game in Asia, so I've done that several times. I've done like Crossfire and Special Force and
Mm.
all those types of things. The Counter Strike and Tekken one that you're talking about, this was for G Star, which is the biggest gaming convention in Korea. It's down in Busan City, and yeah, it's fun. I really enjoy doing some other games sometimes. Like I would not be a professional Counter-Strike commentator. Well, I mean, maybe in another world I would be really interested in putting the time and effort, but like when someone contacts me 2 weeks before and it's like we need commentary for this, Nick and I talk about it and we look at what we actually can do because we'll never agree to do a broadcast that we can't add some sort of value
Hmm.
and quality to. So we look at games and we're like, how well do we know this?
Is
How
that
well
for
can we
branding?
prep?
Branding?
Well,
Or
yeah, I
yeah.
don't want to put out a bad product. It's
Hmm.
like I am about quality, and I will continue to be about quality, and I will not just do things for money. That's like something I am very adverse to. Um, and I would say Nick is the same, right? He doesn't do something like that. So we talked about it. And like for instance, we did, I believe it was Tekken 7 and Counter Strike there. And while we appreciate both games, we're certainly not experts. So, you know, I did things like I printed out all the maps and put all the sites and got the lingo and all this. And I mean, once upon a time I played a lot of Counter-Strike and stuff, but I can't analyze it. They have great commentators in that scene.
Yeah.
So we're just like, okay, let's keep it light. You know, let's make it fun. And that's why we're screaming when the bomb, like, you know, that the bomb is getting defused as soon as he starts. It's gonna make it. But you know, and as long as you let your audience know, it's like, guys, we aren't pretending to be experts at this. We're just gonna have some fun and commentate it. And honestly, we know Counter-Strike better than all the other possible commentators out here. So you know, that's kind of how that goes down.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was very enjoyable, and it was very obvious that, you know, you guys weren't pretending to know anything that you didn't, and it was just very light take on it. And
something like that as well, by the way, is like a little side note, right? Like, you'll get people to tune in that get really salty about it. And it's then most people, though, are like, oh, that was kind of fun. But you got to be careful not to do broadcasts like that too often. That's like a very rare thing. It's been a while since I've done Counter-Strike. In fact, that might have been the last time that I did Counter-Strike. But like, if we suddenly the next month did the same broadcast, maybe people would still like it. But if the month after that we did another one, suddenly it's going to be like, okay, this is getting old, right? So it's like, it's kind of like a gimmick. Yeah. Right? A gimmick build is what I would call it, like in StarCraft, where it's like, yeah, this is for a best of one.
You would flame them. You would flame yourself then.
Yeah. That's how that goes.
All right. So I think this is actually a good transition for our second video here, and because this one's a little bit more less lighthearted, I guess. You can see the preview here, but I found this one to be just absolutely hilarious. So I'm gonna play it. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Is this just a thing that I'm gonna have to live through for the rest of my life? Is people trying to guess? They're like, what part of him is fake? What part of Artosis is fake? He has to be as one-dimensional as I think he is. He's playing something up. Either he's really professional in cast or he's playing it up on stream. But guys, can I be like a person with more than one mode? Can I be a complex human being? Is that alright? Are we okay with that? Oh, what is this fucking guy? On his stream persona, it's not just the typical frustration of a player. He takes another level, accusing other streamers of cheating. Fucking idiot. When
the sound of
belief false, being trash, stupid, etc., truly toxic behavior, which, as I said in other comments, I hope isn't the real him. And look at this. This guy's like, oh, hold on, we'll be a team of detectives, is what we'll be. Other guy on Reddit. Let's be a detective team. It was exactly like this before StarCraft II came out, so I'm pretty sure the caster persona's the manufacturer one. Fucking idiot.
The misclick.
Jesus. Pretty sure people don't have just one personality on stage. He's there with his buddy having little stake on how the game mechanics work for him. Imagine how awkward that would be if he was sitting there insulting the game nonstop while Taste is just sitting there like, what the fuck, dude, you okay? That's a more reasonable comment, thank you. He's been right about players stream sniping him before and them later admitting it. Thank you. Someone who actually knows what's going on. Thank you. I'll give you an award.
We need more gold.
I have no gold coins.
All right, so that is one of my personal favorites, and the reason for that is I think there's very few people in the scene or otherwise, very few public people that are willing to kind of be okay with the full extent of who they are, right? Like, and they will go to very many extents to just show the best sides, I guess, of themselves, or the best sides perceived outwards. Whereas I completely agree with you, right? Everyone out there is kind of a complex human being, and I'm personally highly suspect of people who are just perfect all the time, you know, because you know that they're not, and you know that they're angry sometimes, and they're just not showing it outwards, right? So for context, on your stream, and while you are actively trying to improve, you're a little bit of a rager,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not just a little bit. I'm a lot of it, Ranger. There's no question. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say there's again very few people. I could count them with one hand. I think Nathanias is another person that kind of owns up to whatever whatever comes out and whatever he feels like saying. But yeah, I really have always appreciated that about you, and I think that it's a good way to be, because it really shows others that people are ultimately human, right? And now on that anger, I find that's extremely common with most of anyone that is trying to be competitive at a game, up until a certain point, perhaps, where most pros, it's like a fuel almost, right? And I've been there, and I think most people that have become good at just about anything have felt, at least to a good degree, a good amount of anger towards their opponents or otherwise, or at yourself. So how does that work out for you? Like in terms of fuel, do you enjoy being angry? Like, talk to me a little bit about this side of Artosis.
So yeah, no, I don't think I enjoy being angry, but I do get angry. Like, I'm very competitive, and the game is frustrating. This is literally the hardest game ever made, and it's tough. I choose the hardest route to take in it, because I am trying for maximum long-term improvement, and that's the hardest thing, right? Like, you can do things that will improve you really vastly short-term and win you more games short-term, but I'm going for like the long haul. Like, I want to be as good as Flash type of way, right? Like, I want to be the best, which is like, I mean, I'm not sitting here saying I'm going to be the best one day, but like, that's the aim, and that makes it more frustrating in a lot of ways, because there's just so many things that can go wrong. But yeah, like the anger thing, people that like get really shocked that you get angry. I think there's a couple things going on. Like you said, people hide who they are and what they actually feel. They, like, if you're only showing the bright, cheery side of yourself, I mean, I think there are people that lose games and are totally cool with it, and are like Nero or someone, right? Where it's like, I know that guy. Like, I bet you he really inside, he's like, that's all right. Even he gets frustrated sometimes and will say it, but like, that's not really me. And occasionally I can lose the game and be totally fine with it. But yeah, the anger has always been a part of me trying to compete and trying to be good. And I bet you if I could control it a little bit better, and sometimes I do, when I do control it a little bit better, I do feel improvement a little bit quicker. But it is like a part of my personality as well. Like, I hold myself to a really, really high standard. Like, higher than people will tell me, it's like higher than I should hold myself to. I should be okay. But I'm like, no, I want to get better, and I want to be able to do this. And I'm so frustrated that sometimes it doesn't work out. Oftentimes it doesn't work out. So yeah, it's just it's a normal thing, and I've always been like this, and I don't know why. Like, it's hard to dive into that, but like, literally always, back in the early 2000s playing, I was furious when losing all the time. I don't know. It's just, it is a part of my personality, I guess.
I think it's a part of everyone's personality, right? It's just to what degree. And you mentioned Neuro, like I take losses in stride these days, but I'm also not trying to be a professional gamer, or not trying, whereas it's very clear with you that you're extremely driven. There's for example an instance that I recall. I don't know the name of the fighter, but you were very happy about an older fighting game player still winning a tournament. Just who was that? Do you remember?
That would be Daigo. And that was like, yeah, like Artosis, feels the Daigo here, right? Like to a good degree. Yeah. All this talk about like you get too old to play and everything. This is kind of the thing that that's really making me happy in my life right now, right? Like, I was really driven for basically my whole life to compete, and then I kind of became a commentator and didn't really compete for a big chunk of years. But now it's like I've kind of hit this other stage of life. I'm married. I have 4 children. I've kind of done the things humans are supposed to do. And now it's like, okay, what do I want to do now? And I find that I'm not done competing, and I want to compete still. And I love seeing things like older players do well. Like Daigo is the oldest active pro gamer in any game in the world as far as esports goes, right? And it's awesome to see him do well because it kind of shows what I'm talking about, where it's like, no, I can do this. I'm better than I've ever been at StarCraft. And
I love that. Yeah, that was my next question. Is how do you feel about your shape right now? So
I would bash younger me. You bring me back to my peak in 2008, and you have me play against him. Oh, that poor guy. He's
what about Day 9? What about Day 9?
This much better? Like, that's crazy.
You would bash Day 9 and back in that same WCG?
Oh my god. Yeah. I mean, the metagame has evolved. The entire skill base of the entire player pool has evolved. I'm much better than I've been in the past, for sure.
How far are you from qualifying for an ASL or for a big tournament in Korea, you feel like?
I'm pretty far, I would say. It's really difficult. I mean, I go to the qualifiers when they come up, and I actually have some pretty good runs, and I do well in a tournament setting. I stay competitive with players up to about 2,400 MMR.
Nice.
Or at least as recently as the last set of qualifiers. So that's like pretty good, but it's really like you got to be 2,700 MMR to really have a chance to get into these things, right? So I'm still a good ways off, but I will continue to work towards it.
Yeah, but it's apparent, right? Like you've taken a game here and there, or had very, very close games against like pros and very high rated players. So that's been it's been awesome to see your progression. Now, in terms of and to touch back on the anger, I feel like that's a very common fuel that a lot of people feel and a lot of people identify with. As much as people are not gonna be like, yeah, Artosis, like they'll laugh at the anger, right, and have fun with it, and I think it's fucking hilarious. But I am sure that a few or more than a few, maybe most of the silent chunk that aren't so much laughing are fully engaged and identify with that anger to a good degree. But like I was saying earlier, and like you alluded to earlier as well, you said, for example, that you feel like you might improve a little bit more if you weren't angry all the time. And I feel like while most people go through that phase, I almost never see such a degree of emotion in the highest tier of competition. Like there's exceptions, like Petit Drogo, for example, in StarCraft II has gotten angry here and there, and he seems like irritable. But for the most part, I think people switch on to a different fuel that's driving them. Maybe when they feel like they can win something and the spotlight, which you're very familiar with, but you know that can be a drive in itself, right? Like a spotlight, or for some people even money. So what I guess I think is anger will get you so far, but at some point, say if you're actively blaming your losses on balance or lessening your opponents, like say for example, a very common trend with you is Protoss, right? Like Protoss is easier to play, but for me, if consciously, and I think that conscious attention is such an important driver and enhancer of what we can ultimately do. If you consciously tell yourself that's easier, or that is worth less, or he cheesed me or something like that, it's kind of like dismiss the degree to where, how do you issue two commands to your body? One being figure out how to beat this, and the other one being, well, it's imbalanced, or it's broken, or it's because they're completely separate commands, right?
Oh, totally. I definitely agree with that, and I think you're right that the anger will only get you so high in such a cognitive game, especially, right? Like I think the anger might work better with something like very physical, where
definitely,
it's not as much about your brain giving you commands on what to do and everything. So yeah, that's definitely something that I work on and I think a lot about, and I reset myself every day. When I get on the stream, right? Like people always notice, like, look at what a good mood he's at in at the beginning of the stream.
So that's I don't mean to harp on the what is the real Artosis here, but when you tweet this is a positive day, or this is, you know, this is gonna be a chill ladder session and we're not gonna get so angry, you mean it.
I do mean it. I try.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is not
I thought
a
it was like a
gimmick.
teaser. Okay.
Yeah, no, this is like it's not just like clickbait or something, or a gimmick. Like I am trying to be less angry with it, because I know on the days where I can get less angry about it, I improve more, I learn more, I do better. Like my last positivity stream, I lost almost no games. It was great.
Nice. That's
but
amazing.
yeah, it can be tough though, right? Because I've been basically playing the same game for over 20 years, and the same things keep popping up, and I you know, it's just it gets very frustrating for sure, right? Like I'll be in a great mood, and then just this absurd string of events will happen, and I'll lose a game that I really shouldn't against someone that I have zero respect for. Zero, because I'm like, you're doing everything wrong. And then one thing goes wrong for me and I lose, and I'm like, it's so hard to deal with that.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I'm glad we didn't ever play much against each other, because you would have hated me for sure.
Yeah.
Whirling guy, man. I know.
Yes, indeed. Oh, that's brilliant. All right, and the last question on anger here. Does that ever bleed into your life, or like, did you have an outlet for, like, for example, when you stopped playing StarCraft for a little bit? Like, is there any way that you can, or that you release that?
Sometimes, if I have a really bad ladder session, there's been times where I leave the stream or just the ladder session that I'm doing privately, and I'm still a little bit angry. But normally it dissipates really quickly. Kids are like a great way to fix this. Like if I go out of my office after playing and I was in a bad mood during the stream, and then one of them is standing there and happy to see me, there's no anger anymore. There can't be, because I'm like, it's, oh, my little girl, okay.
Yeah.
So that can help dissipate it pretty quickly, and yeah, no, it's doesn't make that big of a deal, to be honest. I get over things really quickly. Generally, like, even if I'm really down on myself, within a couple of hours, I start getting excited to practice again the next practice session, right? Where it's like, yeah, that was frustrating, I'm going to do better. And yeah, so it's not that bad. It doesn't remain that long. Sometimes you even see it on stream where I'll be like really angry, and 30 minutes later I'm totally fine, and you know, it's like these bursts of anger, I guess.
That's fantastic. Now, there was one thing that I remember you talking about a long time ago, and this is something where I used to be on the I don't know if the opposite camp, but more on the opposite camp than not, and I have swapped over to your camp, and that is in the talent versus hard work department. You've always been a very strong advocate for hard work, right? And just over. So what's your take on that? How do you feel about that battle?
Yeah. So it's a weird thing. A lot of people. The thing is, talent exists. Obviously, there's going to be people that are naturally better at something than other people. And people. Here's the big problem, I think, when most people talk about this, because most people can't even speak about this in any sort of thinking way. There are a huge amount of people just want to cite talent as, no, I mean, these guys are talented, I can never do it. And it's like, that's mostly BS. That is just not the case, and people use it as an excuse. Because talent is, you can just kind of explain it away. You're like, yeah, see, I'm just not 7 feet tall. Like I can't do it. It's like, yeah, okay, I get it. Yeah, that's a part, but it's scary to work hard and have the possibility of failure. So people want to avoid that and act like they just don't have the talent. And it's a weird thing. Like throughout my StarCraft career, early on in like 2002, a lot of people thought I was a really talented player, right? And that was really intoxicating. Like people are like, oh yeah, you've seen this Artosis guy? He's really talented. Like he's just rising up and doing really well. And that's when I started flying around to tournaments and stuff. And then eventually I figured out, oh, this shit is not holding. Like I had like one of the most impactful people in my life ever was a Brood War friend from Chile. His ID was Kier, and in 2004 we practiced a lot together, and I was shocked because I would practice each year for tournaments and stuff. Like I was making it, I was beating top players and stuff. But in 2004 I started practicing with this guy, and he was such a hard worker. I was shocked. I remember the feeling of like he just wanted me to keep making the map again and keep playing. It's like 5 games in a row, 6 games in a row, 7 games in a row. And at first my ego kept me there, and I was like, oh, I'm not going to quit before him. He just wants to keep going. And eventually I figured it out. Like, this is the hardest working human I have ever run into. And so he kind of taught me that there is this other way. And I changed my entire outlook from all these people tell me I'm talented and I'm doing well at tournaments to I am going to work harder than everybody. Right. And, it's like a scary thing to put all of your eggs into the hard work basket, because first off, you have to do the work, and second off, if you don't make it, that's on you. It's like if you're gonna try to work hard, what are you gonna say at the end? You're like, oh, I guess I just wasn't talented enough. It's like, well, I don't know. That's a weak cop out. So
I think so.
Let me jump back to exactly what you asked, which is like talent versus hard work. Talent exists. It's a real thing. There are players that are so much more talented than me that it hurts my soul. Okay, there are players like, for StarCraft people watching this, Rhett has always been this human that I'm just like, if I had his talent and my work ethic, people wouldn't even talk about Flash. Okay, like he's like the most talented player I've ever seen, and like he'll be inactive for 8 months, and I will have played my hardest for those 8 months, and he will come back, and I will 3-0 him, and then I won't beat him again for 10 games. And I'll be like, what? Like, what? It's ridiculous, the amount of talent. But talent alone won't do it for you. You won't, hard work is really the meat and potatoes of everything. The person who works hard will eventually beat out the talented player who does not. And yeah, I don't know. I hope that somewhat answers your question.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think that, and for example, when it concerns intelligence, there's a lot of quotes by very intelligent and people that would be considered talented that say, hey, it's 90% hard work, right? It's mostly hard work. And I think that's a trend because it's just the truth. I think that human beings are so very complex, and we're doing calculations just to move our fucking arms that go beyond fucking Einstein's genius. It's just that people are very quick to take the easy way out, right? Like, oh, I'm just not good enough. I'm just not talented enough. I'm just this not. And like sometimes I bring up Michael Phelps, for example, for an analogy of swimming. Like, yeah, sure, the guy fucking looks like a shark, right? Like if we both train equally hard, I'm probably not gonna beat him at swimming. But in most other areas, yeah, talent is somewhat of, in my view, a predisposition to do well at something. But you can also predispose yourself, especially not in physical activities where long legs or looking like a shark will fucking net you some benefits, right? So yeah, over time I've really jumped over to the hard work camp as a driver of success versus talent, because no,
I definitely would say so. And I mean, it's as corny as can be, but the Naruto character Rock Lee,
oh, he's the best,
like,
yeah,
right, where it's like this guy has no talent, and then they just show it's like his talent is that of hard work.
Yeah, and
that has resonated with me since 2004 when I started when I switched myself over from believing I was talented to just believing I would outwork everybody, because that's really, at the end of the day, like, hard work actually builds other pieces too that talent does not, right? If you're just very talented and you have a bunch of confidence, that's a little bit misguided, because as soon as you lose, that confidence is going to be really shattered, right? You're suddenly going to be like, oh God, I guess I'm not as talented as I thought. Whereas if you work as hard as you can and you go into something like a competition and you're like, no one outworked me. I worked as hard as I can. This is as good as I can be right now. That's a confidence that can't go away, because you did. You worked as hard as you can, and that's it. You're as prepared as you can be. And when things go wrong, you can go back to the drawing board and continue to work on those. So, I prefer, like, if you could offer me to take away my work ethic at this point and give me the most talent of everyone, I'll just keep the work ethic, because it's serving me well in life, and it's 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 one of the main things I'm trying to teach my children is to work hard rather than, they even have all those studies now where it's like, don't tell your kid they're smart, tell them you're proud of them for working hard. That is, and it just kind of resonates with the path of my life, where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is what it's all about. If you work hard, you will always just kind of make it.
Yeah. And another very good example of that, for example, was from my view at least, Idra, right? Like he's a player that worked incredibly hard in Brood War, and when StarCraft II comes out, I mean, if you look at the guy, you might think, well, he's incredibly talented, but no, it's just that he predisposed himself by playing more than anyone else, right? Or special for that matter. Formerly major, like they're people that made their own talent in that sense. So I completely agree with you on that. Now to swap...
talent won't get you to the top alone. Just one more word on that. Like, I mean, this is starting to come out. I'm sure everyone watched that Michael Jordan documentary.
Oh, I didn't watch it.
He worked harder than everyone. That's it. It's like, maybe he's also the most talented, but without the hard work, you aren't going to make it anywhere. So,
no, I completely agree. I think it's and again, like I feel like people really tend to underestimate their own abilities. I think that any given human being is just far too complex for any other human being, no matter how, like when we talk about things like intelligence or this natural predisposition, it's really just our conscious ability to kind of verbalize intelligence, right? It's our ability to put things into words or see patterns that, whether you want to see them or not, your body is seeing them, and your body does the work. And in so long as you are putting in work and have routines in place that's basically what does the work for you, right? Like most of our processing is subconscious. So the things that we blabber, they're not nearly as essential.
The conscious mind, it doesn't really have anything to do with doing things well. The conscious mind can help you sort things and feed them correctly to the unconscious mind. That is a huge topic that you just mentioned there, but absolutely I agree with that. Like, and hard work, you can feed the things you need in your conscious mind to your unconscious mind, right? And that's like, eventually that will look like talent. Absolutely. Hydra could macro like a beast because he put in all that hard work consciously, and then it just was there.
Yeah, exactly. It's I remember actually one of the first times that I beat you call him Hydra, huh? That I beat Greg in StarCraft II. What he said was, anyone can macro in this game. It's definitely a lot easier to macro in StarCraft II than it was in Brood War, and that's something that was like his trademark, right? Like something that he put so much work into. Yeah.
That's how he won everything in StarCraft I, is he could make more units than everyone else, and that is the best skill you can have in StarCraft I, is being able to make more units.
Yeah, and a lot of that is just through repetition and through hard work. Exactly. So I really love to talk about things like this, and I love that you sharing on now my opinions, but I've really adopted your opinions over time in that regard, because I used to be on the Neji camp, but now I'm a Rock Lee fan.
That's right. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, it really is.
Everyone should make that transition over time.
I think so. I think it's a realization maybe more than it's just something that you come to, and you're like, well, wait. Like it's just, it doesn't make sense. The other approach doesn't make much sense. Now, to talk a little bit about StarCraft II maybe in its current state, it's just to touch on this briefly. I wanted to make this episode mostly about you, but obviously you are also one of the most prominent figures in the game, and I would say the representative of Korea in terms of what's been going on and whatnot. Korea just striked back, I guess. Korean StarCraft II has been falling a little bit, I would say, for maybe since the beginning. Like there's been kind of a drought for new blood coming from Korea. So what's the panorama looking like there, and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, it's honestly, I feel a bit depressed about it. It's just StarCraft II is not that popular here. We don't have a lot of rising talent. People are preferring to play non-RTS games or StarCraft I over StarCraft II. You even see a lot of the good StarCraft II pros playing a lot of StarCraft I nowadays. TY is really high level. He just won GSL twice this year, and he's like beating pro gamers in StarCraft I again already.
Oh wow.
You know, Parting, I saw an account high up on the ladder called Parting. I bet you that's him.
Really?
You know,
How high?
oh, he like 2,500.
Oh
like,
shit. Okay.
Like breaking in. Like that's when someone hits 25 and 24 are very different in Brood War, where it's like, oh, 25, that's crazy.
Oh really?
Yeah, that's where you're like, oh, this guy can actually do it. You know. But yeah, it's the StarCraft II. It's just we don't have many players that show up to qualifiers, which is that feels really weird, right? It's like you have GSL, this wonderful, amazing tournament that you know they all watch, and then you get some of the top amateur players that don't show up. And it's just it's like, first off, you play so much. Like, why aren't you? I know that you know these guys are better than you, but there's just not that drive there in a lot of ways. You know, sponsorships are really down for the StarCraft II players. Their streams, you know, it's mostly foreign viewers. It's not like there's a big streaming base of StarCraft II on a freaking TV or something like that. Yeah, it's kind of sad. Like, you see, even GSL has contracted. We no longer have round of 32. We have round of 24.
Oh wow,
And
I didn't realize that. Yeah.
Yeah, that takes a couple broadcast days out of each season, right? I think we dropped from 17 to 15 broadcast days, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like, oh god, yeah, this is all showing, and we have people going to the military. Now, luckily, we have people coming out of the military that are coming back and playing very well, like Beyond.
Yeah, amazing.
So stuff like that is really helping. But the next couple years, we're going to lose a lot more top-end pros, right? And I don't know what the scene is really going to look like after that. I mean, I want it to go well. Honestly, I think it's probably time to undo region lock. This has been, like, I'm just watching the Korean scene get pummeled for being better than everyone, and, you know, just the decisions that were made as far as how esports were going to look.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think it would be a good time to undo region lock as well. I think that that there was a good time to do region lock, and now I think it would be proper to undo it. And people really are liking that rivalry and seeing how Koreans stack up, because they're still some of the best players. And that's I started by saying they just strike back because Beyond just won Asus ROG, and Koreans destroyed foreigners in that tournament, whereas in the previous tournament, in the EPT, foreigners kind of, you know, it was kind of like the opposite. For the first time ever, it was like just 2 Koreans in the round of 8 or something, and none in the or just stats in the semifinals. Yeah, so yeah, absolutely crazy, but it's been good to see. Now, the rise of foreigners, seeing as you're kind of like a Korean foreigner almost, right? Like you love Korea and you live in Korea. So how was it for you? Was it bittersweet, for example, or was it just because I cried when, say, Seoul won BlizzCon, right? Like, because fucking, I don't know, 17 years of Korean dominance, and then that happened, and I was there, and I was just so emotional. But how was it for you?
Yeah, it was really exciting to see Seoul rise up, and finally we have someone that's not Korean that is on the level or above the level of the Korean players. It's definitely something that I was trying to help foster for a really long time. You know, it's how I got into commentary, was trying to raise up the non-Korean scene. And then when I went to Korea at first, you know, my main focus, the main thing I was working on in the office each day, well, obviously I did a lot of commentary as well, but like trying to get non-Koreans over to Korea to play, because I have a deep love of the non-Korean scene, because I was part of it for so long as a competitive player, and I saw how we had, you know, nothing compared to them, and everyone's still working hard and still loves it. So it's really touching to see them raise up. But I think I guess the problem is that StarCraft II isn't as big in Korea. It's just not as popular. So it was great to see that, but with very little new blood joining the Korean scene and watching it kind of deteriorate, it's a bit bittersweet, I guess, right? It's great to have the foreigners doing well, but to watch the Korean scene just fall apart is like, oh man, this is like, at what cost? Like, what are we doing?
It never was though big, the scene in Korea, comparatively, at least, right? Like, I mean, as a country, surely, yeah, but you know, as a country, it's like there's many countries that are big on StarCraft, right? So as a single country, Korea was that, but it fostered and it had so much of the talent, and it had so much of the player base that had risen up in an environment that was culturally more accepting, and had the infrastructure to go along with it, and so Koreans rose to the top disproportionately to the amount of people that were actually playing the game, I suppose, right? So yeah, I guess that is a little bit sad. What do you have any ideas? Because I've never quite understood why it is that StarCraft didn't take off in Korea, StarCraft II.
Star 2? Well, people did like StarCraft 1 better. I mean, it had a lot of popularity when it first came out. I think the initial divide, like, it was almost like a botched launch in some ways, where, you know, Blizzard made the contract with GOM TV to make GSL, and that was trying to go up against
KeSPA,
the Pro League, the KeSPA, this juggernaut of a system. And I still think to this day, it's the greatest esports system by miles that the world has ever had. Was the OSL MSL Pro League system.
Was that a mistake then? Maybe was that too greedy by Blizzard?
Yeah, I don't know. It's easy to look back and be like, these things went wrong, but what should they have done? I'm not entirely sure. Like, I mean, eventually we had that weird hybrid Pro League where they were trying to get people to switch over to StarCraft II, but it didn't sell. Like the
it was too late, maybe, right?
StarCraft 1. Yeah, I think so. But it's kind of like StarCraft 2 came out. It was like kind of, they tried to force it upon Korea, which makes sense, right? Like you see how great StarCraft is, and StarCraft 2, great game, and you're trying to recreate this all with StarCraft 2 in a more controlled fashion.
Right.
But what it did was it partially murdered StarCraft 1, and then StarCraft 2 didn't maintain. And like for a while it did well, and there was a lot of players out here, and it kind of fell off, and StarCraft 1 started rising up again, and now we have kind of these two half systems going on where there's GSL but not a lot of new players, and then StarCraft 1 is rising again and has a lot of players and a lot more viewers as far as Korean viewers go. So
yeah,
I don't have like an easy answer for what should have been done, honestly.
Yeah, but you talked about the system that they were going up against in KeSPA, right? And it's something that they were vocal about trying to prevent is what happened with KeSPA, where they basically, from Blizzard's perspective, I suppose, appropriated the game and made up a bunch of money and profited so much from it, where Blizzard probably felt like, oh, that's our game, we should have been making money instead, right? Just like kind of like how Dota emerged from Warcraft 3 and it went away, and they've cranked up on their policies on those regards to try to avoid things like that happening. But things like that happen organically, and I feel like they should have been welcomed instead, right? So what was the fight back by the juggernaut that is KeSPA then? How did they prevent, if at all, say promotion or growth for StarCraft 2? How did they communicate to the Korean audience, hey, let's stay in StarCraft 1, this is the better game?
Well, I think, they had most of the big names still in StarCraft 1, and I don't know that it was much of a war or anything. They just kind of still had their stuff going on when StarCraft 2 did come out. I mean, they did get some big names over to GSL, like Boxer and Nada, right? Those were huge deals. We had some other pros because, like, for instance, the team that I was living with, Eastro, disbanded, and then a bunch of those players, a bunch of the early dominators were from that team because they just came over, right? MVP switched over, but he was kind of a low ranking.
Yeah, he wasn't very known.
StarCraft 1.
So was Nesty, right? 2v2 player, I think.
Nesty was basically retired at that point. He was more of a coach, and 2v2 when they had it, but 2v2 was kind of not really a thing anymore. So yeah, a lot of these people that they got were not as highly ranked, and then they did have the two initial Terran Bonjoas, which I guess helped. But yeah, it was kind of like it fractured the RTS audience, the StarCraft audience, right? And then it tried to get glued together at the cost of StarCraft 1 being kind of slain, right? And yeah, a lot of this does go back to like Blizzard tries to make everything in-house. And the thing is, I enjoyed WCS. And there were definitely mistakes made, but there was also a lot of great stuff happening. And, you know, that did allow the rise of a really strong non-Korean players eventually. It took a long time. But it's kind of sad when you look at the entire arc. And I guess the arc is not necessarily completely over yet, right? Like RTS will continue to go on and everything. And StarCraft I will continue to go on, and StarCraft II will continue to go on. And maybe we'll get a StarCraft III eventually. But when you look at the overall arc and what happened in the Korean scene, and the fact that now Blizzard has hands off, we're not doing esports with StarCraft anymore. Here you go, ESL.
Yeah.
You look at that and you're like, well, shit, this was like a wrecking ball that went through here, right? This was not like, when you look at the long-term growth, what did we get? We got after all of this, yeah, we had this beautiful StarCraft II esport, which will continue to go on. We got Seoul.
Yeah.
But the Korean scene is nowhere near where it once was. So yeah, was this good? Was it bad? Was there another way? There had to have been another way, but I don't know what that way would have been.
Yeah, I think that was a very satisfactory explanation, though, in terms of because it is very personality driven, and the personalities in StarCraft I were so very established that I think the audience would see to that, you know, if there's a new basketball league and Michael Jordan was around and he didn't switch, you know, but someone, I guess Michael Jordan is like a bad example because he's kind of like boxer more than he is Flash at that point in time, right? But my point is, if the best players are not switching, then the audience probably goes with that and says, you know, let's not. And I think the best players didn't switch because all the infrastructure was in place, and KeZPA was being kind of, to some degree, I assume, gated from profiting from StarCraft II, whereas they had no constraints with StarCraft I, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the infrastructure that StarCraft I had, and the companies that were teams in StarCraft I, the biggest companies in Korea, basically, right? The biggest telecom providers, the company that builds ships, the giant conglomerate that owns television stations and drinks that you buy, and, you know, just gigantic companies. So like everything was aligned with StarCraft I, and then you get like the GSTL that is trying to compete with Pro League to some degree. And what do you have for the teams? It's like just these teams that have names like they're BattleNet clans, right? And they don't actually, it just, there was so much more legitimacy with the StarCraft I scene. And yeah, it's just, when you think about the fans, they could be a fan of the team, they could be a fan of the player, either way.
Or even just
like
be familiar with the brands, right? Like, I mean, in the US, I fucking make my bulgogi with CJ sauce, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, the people switching over to StarCraft II from in Korea, it was the least successful, least popular players, because the successful, popular players, the strongest players, are already doing well in StarCraft I.
Right.
So it's the bottom tier that goes to StarCraft II, which they don't have the fan base. They don't have, you know, they got Boxer and Nada. Those were the two big names, but everyone else, like I mentioned, MVP, he didn't have any fans in StarCraft I, like very few. He was not a big deal.
And Boxer and Nada, I mean, way past their peak, right? Like Boxer and Nada, as much as they were bonjos, you know, they were them for a while. So
I mean, they did well in GSL and stuff, and they put on some great games and definitely helped us along in GSL. But it's not the same. You're definitely right. Like the fan base is gonna stay with what they're fans of. Like it's very hard to force that switch. It's been a very interesting learning period, I think, for everyone in the whole industry. I think that StarCraft II has been the number one thing that everyone has learned from. So many lessons about what happens in these different really hard decisions and ways to approach things.
Yeah, completely agreed. And it's been super fun to be part of that process as well, and to yell against the injustices or the silly mistakes as they are happening, right? So yeah, I completely agree. Blizzard could have been better, I think, predominantly at listening to the fan base as well on many fronts, but in this regard, at just being a little bit less greedy, maybe. I think we more or less cracked the code there as far as why StarCraft II didn't take off as much as it maybe could have in Korea. Yeah, that's
Maybe like a more favorable deal to Kespa or something. But
yeah, exactly.
honestly, like here's the thing too, that we need to give them some credit, because if they had given everything to Kespa and let Kespa do it, there might not have been that big esports boon, because GSL led off the esports boon in the West, right?
Yes.
And that was a big part of it, was having the English broadcasts and everything. And
Yeah.
GomTV was literally one of the only places that was a platform that could actually do this.
I am almost
Kespa
sure,
didn't have
Artosis, that Kespa would have hired you guys though, because there was an audience to service in StarCraft II in the West, whereas there wasn't an audience to service in, back in StarCraft I.
I think it, but I think there's a possibility things get lost in the shuffle a little bit with Kespa, because it's still a thing even to this day. There's more effort, budget, everything put into the Korean side of GSL, even though the English side gets way more views.
Oh,
right?
really?
It's just that this is just the way things go out here. Every English broadcast is basically an afterthought in Korea.
Interesting.
It's like just not as important, not as much effort put into any of it. So yeah, how would that have turned out? I think that there was some definitely very lucky things about it going to GomTV, which helped the boom and the foreign scene to grow with StarCraft II. Like for instance, Mr. Che is just what an important human being.
Yeah.
Like he's the one that created GSL and commentated at the beginning. And it like if it had gone to Kespa, it might have actually just been thrown away after a few years when the Korean fans weren't taking. Whereas with GomTV,
that I think they would have taken. That's the thing.
Maybe, yeah. If it got taken, then yes. But if it didn't get taken, then they might have thrown it away. Whereas when that's GomTV's only thing and it's Mr. Che behind it,
yeah, he's a wonderful guy. Yeah, we have to be grateful. I agree. We have to be grateful for what we did get and for what GomTV became. And yeah, absolutely. I just think there's an alternate universe where maybe they hire Mr. Che to run the thing for Kespa anyway. Things just happen a little bit better for everyone. Now, going into the future of RTS, there's a couple of promising prospects. You talked about how you enjoyed Age of Empires 3 at some point. I similarly took a break from StarCraft at some point to play games like Dota and kind of give it my all for a little bit in Dota 1. So how do you feel about Age of Empires 4, for example, as well as Frost Giant's potential new RTS? They've been very good at gathering feedback, and we've all gotten to talk to them, and they're a wonderful bunch of individuals. As well as, I suppose, people were asking about if you personally think that there's a chance that one of Mike Morhaim's ventures will go into RTS.
Yeah, so as far as the Mike Morhaim side of it, I hope so, but I'm not... The way they described the two studios that they have working on games, it does not sound like one is RTS.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to discount that for now. If anything Mike touches, though, turns to gold. So
yeah,
if he's making an RTS, amazing. Yeah, I've been very excited about AoE 4 since I heard about it. I'm cautiously optimistic. It's, as far as high-end studios working on a game, it's like the studio you've heard of working on an RTS. Now, it's not the original Age of Empires studio. I think AoE 3 I really did like when it came out. I haven't touched it or looked at it since, early 2006. But AoE 2 obviously has a huge scene right now, and it's doing very, very well. So we know Age of Empire games are really good.
Yeah.
Age of Empires 4 is actually being made by Relic, who made the Dawn of War games.
Oh,
now,
cool.
Dawn of War 1, I think, is one of the most interesting, coolest RTSs ever.
Yeah.
Dawn of War 2, I didn't really play, and I think Dawn of War 3 was actually really bad.
I think that's the one that Select was good at, or was it Dawn of War 2? I don't remember.
Dawn of War 1, Select was
the world champion. What a guy.
Yeah.
That guy.
That's right. Yeah, the Koreans win at every RTS, man. And so, yeah, Age of Empires 4, the thing is, as long as they take an Age of Empires route, I think it can be a really great game, and I'm very excited to try it. And I'm gonna give it my all for a month or two at least, and see if I like it, because I think this is something that people don't realize. You have to put unreal hours into an RTS to figure out if it's good.
Yeah,
like serious hours. Like right now, I'm playing a lot of Spellforce 3, and like
Oh, you liked it that
really
much,
fun.
huh? I saw a sponsored stream for it, but then you picked it up, huh?
It's good though. I really am digging it. It's a very fun game. It's kind of reminds me of Age of Empires a little bit, and it's something fresh and new and cool to play. But yeah. So back to the new RTSs coming out. So Age of Empires 4, like when it first comes out, people might just get some impression and be like, oh, this is bad, or oh, this is good. But honestly, we're not going to know for a while because RTSs are so deep. It takes a long time to drill down and figure out what you're actually doing and see if that's going to actually be good or not. But I'm going to play a lot of that. I'm excited about it.
I'll say though, and I don't mean no disrespect, but like there's been a few games that, you know, you pick up and you're like, yeah, this is not it, right? Like it's easier to be like, yeah, this is definitely not it than to be like, whoa, this is definitely it.
Yeah. You can discount games much quicker than you can say yes to them because you never know what's going to really end up surfacing. But there's definitely games where, like Dawn of War 3, right? I played it for, I think, 3 hours and never since.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, this is not it. It's just, you can tell when you move the units around. You can tell by the way the economy functions and how there's 90 upgrades for each race. I'm like, no, this is not the RTS game that's going to take over.
Yeah.
For Frost Giant though, that's in my opinion, I know those people, and that is a good group of people to be working on a game. Those are like, if StarCraft III was being made and those were the people making it, I'd be like, oh yeah, all right. And the fact that they're like a smaller company, I think helps a lot. The crazy bureaucratic fashion that pops up at places that get big like Blizzard really, I think, spoils how good something can be. It makes things worse over time the bigger the company gets. So it's really exciting to see.
It's much slower to adapt. It's much slower to move that type of vision.
Yeah. You got to get everyone in line, and you have all these company policies and stuff, and it's like you're more trying to make money than make a good game. But I mean, these guys they're fresh. They're excited about this new company. I had a long talk with them on the Pylon show about it, like 3 hours talking to them or something, and they have all the right answers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're aiming at it in the right way. And obviously it's early on and we don't know what it's going to look like at all yet. But that's the most likely successor to StarCraft II is whatever Frost Giant's going to put out. If you had to bet, that would be the one to bet.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think
even though I am very excited about AoE 4, I can't wait to try it.
Yeah, same. Like I share in on all of your opinions. I kind of pick up like most RTSs that come out or watch you or someone else play those RTSs and see if it's the thing for me. And I haven't seen one that's really good. I think Tooth and Tail got a lot of hype, and you don't mind the graphics, so you would obviously like that one.
I think that was probably the best RTS released since StarCraft II. Honestly, Tooth and Tail was very different and amazingly well made. That was a great game, and I wish that it had picked up a bit, but
yeah, I think it has to do with just the way that it looks and stuff like that. It doesn't feel like a AAA title. And on that regard,
it's not. It's a small one, but it's a very good game.
Yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, as far as like big titles, AoE 4 I think is the biggest one that we've had in a while. There's a little bit of a myth that should be dispelled that RTS can't take off with kids these days, basically, because it just hasn't been popular. But I think it hasn't been popular because every game has been bad since StarCraft 2 more or less, right? So I'm really hopeful for AoE 4. As far as Frost Giant, one thing that got me really hopeful as well is that while they are a smaller company, because you see a lot of these attempts and they kind of fall flat because a lot of them are kind of like remakes or attempts at remakes of a lesser version with a shittier engine of StarCraft 2 or a shittier version of Warcraft 3, and it's like it's already been done and it's there and it's better, right? So it just doesn't take off. So one question that I asked them, I unfortunately, and they have been gathering so much feedback already from all the influencers in StarCraft 2 and in Warcraft 3 and classic RTS games and just in general, that it's really great to see and be a part of that. But I had a meeting with them, and one of the questions that I had was, can you actually compete? Can you actually make an engine that is competitive with StarCraft II's, because that I know that was a lot of work. I know that was very expensive to make. And so I was like, as a smaller company, like I personally don't want a tooth and tail, it's just not visually appealing. It doesn't, it doesn't click as well as StarCraft II might. So, can you give me something that's not tooth and tail, but something more like StarCraft II? And their answer was, if we were to remake StarCraft II from scratch, we could do it better. And I was like, okay, well, that's fucking great. That's all I need to know, right? Like, so,
That's a big thing that most people that make an RTS miss out on, is how everything moves. That's the quickest way to tell if an RTS is good or not.
Mm-hmm.
If your units don't, there's just a certain way, especially with Blizzard RTS games. I remember the second I tried Heroes of the Storm as well, I felt the same thing. As soon as I started moving the hero around, I was like, oh, there you go. It's like you can just, as someone who's played a lot of RTS, you can just sit down and move a couple things and be like, oh, it moves
like you
exactly how it should. There's
exactly.
a certain way that you need your units to move to make the game viable long-term and competitively.
Yeah. A sense of immersion, right? To where it moves like you think it's going to move, like it makes sense that it would move like it's an extension of your hands. And that's really great to see. On the design front now, which is something that we haven't touched on particularly, you love Brood War. I played Brood War recently, and some of the feedback that I also gave him is play some Brood War, because that game I went in to play Brood War because Tasteless wanted to do the show match, and he challenged me, and I was sad about the outcome of the prior show matches, and I didn't think it was reflective of Tasteless power. So I was like, all right, like give me a couple weeks. And I really thought I would not enjoy it, okay? I really thought this is going to be a shittier version of StarCraft II. I'm going to go in, I'm going to get through this, power through 2 weeks. But I loved it. And I got reminded of why I loved it. And it's because a lot of these things that seemed, in my perception and in my mind looking back, as clunky mechanics, and maybe a lot of them are by accident, are so awesome, because I feel like the fingerprint of a player in Brood War is much more prominent than it is in StarCraft II, for example, or in most other RTSs. And the reason for that is, from my perspective, like as I was trying to analyze why, because this is just what I do naturally, is I try to analyze why do I like this, why is this working the way that it is, and compare it, right? And at some point I had done a video on differences between Brood War and StarCraft II, and I found that video was not like fair to Brood War on many fronts, because what I felt like when I was playing Brood War, and as far as like the player fingerprint, is that the fact that you have many more control groups, right? You can't just put all the units into one control group, and some people think that makes the game easier or harder. And that's kind of how what my initial take was, is, well, Brood War is a little bit harder because there's more actions to be had. And I realized, actually, as far as speed, StarCraft II moves a lot faster than Brood War does, right? Like you go through screens a lot faster, and you have to process a lot more information. Not that it's heavy processing, but you have to process a lot more screens and whatnot a lot faster. And part of that is because in Brood War, when you decide, say, I want to move my army from here to there, you have to do 3 or 4 or 5 different actions to do that action. So it's a compounded set of actions that takes a certain space, whereas in StarCraft II, you would just do one action and move quickly onto the next thing. And that makes it so that while there is more things in Brood War to do in Brood War, it is impossible for any human being to do all of them, right? So you have to decide, do I want to move my army or do I want a macro? Whereas in StarCraft II, it's like move your army and go to the next screen, macro, and continue to move your army, and you're expected to be looking like there's no fight. It's very rare that in a pro level game that a fight would happen without both players staring at that screen. Whereas in Brood War, my economy might have been shattered, but in the fight, maybe I still stand a chance to turn around the game on the basis that if I micro and my opponent is macroing, because they feel like that's the more important thing to do, I can still catch back up. I can still make something happen there, because no one has no, not even Flash, right, can budget every action that needs to be made in Brood War. So I recommended that they play some Brood War and see that if there is some way to incorporate that sort of element into a future RTS. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I think you described it really, really well. It's definitely very different, but StarCraft II is faster paced. The thing is, I think about StarCraft I that makes it very hard. It is very difficult mechanically, and there's so many ways to differentiate yourself. Like you said, like no one can even come close to doing everything you need to do. Like you can watch Flash and he'll have 7 SCVs, not mine. It's like he's by far the best there's ever been, by far. And you can't, and you have to make those decisions. There's just Brood War forces you to make so many decisions every game at every single step because you have to give up things all the time. And they're
meaningful. Yeah, very meaningful decisions.
And the fingerprint thing you said is exactly right. Like I can spot StarCraft II players who cover the name tags pretty well. Brood War 10 times better. Yeah. It's like you can just tell almost instantly. You can tell with the first 3 buildings who is who. There's like Terran players where when they place their first depot, I'm like, that's Ample. Like it's just it's so stylistic because you can't.
Who's the Wraith guy? Is it?
There's like 2 Wraith guys, Leda and Lomo, but Lomo's not around now. Yeah, Leda. He's the Wraith guy.
Yeah.
He's a pro gamer that his main skill is microing a unit no one uses.
Exactly. And he's he'll beat the shit out of anyone who's not a pro gamer with it, right? And that's just absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I love that.
I don't stand a chance against that guy. But he doesn't stand a chance to win a championship. It's like, it's crazy. Yeah. The skill differentiation that Brood War gives you is much larger than any other game, really. Yeah. Like, you can really distance yourself in so many ways. Where in StarCraft II, like you mentioned earlier, I just said, like, oh, anyone can macro in this game.
Yeah.
Everyone's macro is a lot closer than that than in Brood War.
Idra actually said that, but you would have said it too.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely true. It's like it's a very different type of game like that, but there's no reason why people wouldn't enjoy that. I like how strategic it is for that reason. It's funny because when I played StarCraft II for years and years and didn't touch Brood War for 8 years or something. Like I played 1 game in 8 years or something like that, and it was just like, you know, I don't like to play things I'm not really trying to be good at. But my ideas about what it was changed, just like you just mentioned, where I was like, yeah, it's harder mechanically, but you know, StarCraft II, that's where the strategy is and stuff. And actually, now I'm closer to your opinion, where it's like, yeah, mechanically you have more to do in Brood War for sure, but it's actually I feel almost more like Brood War is more about decisions.
Yeah.
Than StarCraft II. In StarCraft II, a lot of decisions get made for you. Like you'll scout it and you'll know the decision tree that leads you to the next thing. It's like, yes, you have to do that now.
Yeah.
Whereas in Brood War, it's like you have like 4 decisions you can make every few seconds, and it's just up to you to make these decisions all fit together and make it work and stuff. Yeah. It's a beautiful game like that.
I completely agree. I kind of swapped places, and of course at the highest level of StarCraft II there's still a lot of like strategic differencing, but you know, like there's a gap of I can't spread creep as well as you can, and you can budget that action in, and that's the right thing to do, and if you're not doing it, then you're just falling behind. So it's like so quick paced in that sense, and a lot of those are like spreading creep, right? Like that's not really a decision. It's like if you're not spreading creep, you're doing it wrong, period, right? So I completely agree with you, and I definitely switched camps on that to where there's more to do in Brood War, but a lot of those actions are not actions that you need to process over and over, and so it feels slower paced, right? Because to do an action it takes longer, and it's like
it feels like there's more to do in Brood War because of how long it takes to do everything to issue those actions, and
because you're missing out on so many actions no matter what.
You're always trading, and like honestly, the more I've been practicing heavily since StarCraft Remastered came out, and the more that I realize what we're talking about here, right? Because it's like one thing to say it, but to put it into practice, it actually makes me a much better player to actually think out loud about like, oh, I can't vulture harass here where I really like to, because that's where my macro's falling behind. So I should actually just say, screw it, I'm not vulture harassing, and instead I'm going to macro there, and then I'll vulture harass or something like that.
And I love that, because then you're incorporating what we were talking about in terms of like a fingerprint, right? Like you're developing your style over time, and you're saying this is the spot where, you've played the game so many times that you're like, in this position, like I won't vulture harass. Whereas a more novice player might try to do it all, and they'll just fall behind and
they'll fall apart completely. And it's like those are decisions you need to make, and like figuring out where your skill set fits, what fits you. You can't just copy pro gamers, because each pro gamer plays completely different from each other. And that's the fingerprint, like you said, right? Like you can become a pro gamer with basically any style. You have to apply it correctly.
So I really hope that they take some of those elements into whatever RTS gets made, because when you simplify things like control groups, not harp on it too much, it makes it so that a lot of those decisions are taken out. I wonder if there is a way that they can solve for having more of a fingerprint, because I think that that's super attractive as a prospect for players, right? Individuality is just an attractive prospect. Like being unique is an attractive prospect, I think, to most people. And
I think it makes for better viewership in a lot of ways, and a more fun practice session. I see a lot of pro gamers in StarCraft II complain about when there's not a patch for a long time. They get really bored of practicing the exact same build over and over because you keep hitting it. Whereas in Brood War, like, it changes literally every game. Like the moment that you're going to max out and when you're going to take your bases, and like you never get 2 games in Brood War that look the same.
Why is that?
Ever. There's just too many decisions that are being made on both sides. So, like, whereas when I'm playing StarCraft II, high level on the ladder or something, right? I'll have games that look very, very similar. Like, it's like, yep, there's the timing push on the 4th base, TVZ. His creep spread's a little bit further back. He's during the Hydra transition. Okay, break the base.
And in that sense, it can be mapped out more, right? And that removes some longevity from like the strategy, at least in the long term, right? It does get stale, it does get boring if games continue to look the same all the time.
And I think that's part of the reason why patching is actually really good in StarCraft II. Like it really it does make StarCraft II better, even though I was complaining about it earlier in our conversation. I think it makes the game better. But with Brood War, there's so many different decisions. It's like they will have completely different stuff. If I do the same build twice in a matchup, it will be completely different. There's just so many reactions that you have to do, and everyone plays so differently and puts your units in different places and scouts differently and text differently and macros differently, and it's just there's such a wealth of decisions. You just don't get 2 games that look the same.
There is a current trend for in StarCraft II though that gives me a lot of hope for its future competitively, which is, I think, in part due to players like Raynor, who is just extremely chaotic. And it's a trend where players are willing to throw in wrenches. I told you, like, Seoul started proxy hatching now, man. So you know, like when things like that happen, it's very difficult to figure out what the right response is, and every game is kind of different, like you were saying, because players are more willing now to throw in a wrench early on to disrupt their opponent, and that's something that takes off very quickly in Korea, I guess, because of their Brood War background. But it's a thing that's only now started to happen in the foreign scene, where players are becoming much more unpredictable, and for Europeans in particular, much less macro-oriented necessarily, or you know, with a, like, I remember just a couple of years ago, and during the rise of Seoul, and as he was getting extremely good, and even while he was the best, he was very proud of his macro, right? Like there was this nation war where it was Peru versus Finland, right? And then he was talking about how he was gonna play macro, and him and Sugiliag were gonna play the macro game, you know. And it's like he was proud of it, right? But now motherfuckers proxy hatching, so like I love that trend towards chaos, because it will keep things fresh for a little while longer, and that is a good thing. But I completely
100%.
share in on your.
You want
opinions.
games to be chaotic, and I guess that's that's what Brood War is. It's like your game is on fire the whole time, and the more that gets added in to StarCraft II, the better. And I think that players that cause that are going to generally benefit a lot from it, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do I word that correctly? Like,
I'm with you.
if you are comfortable playing in those situations, like look at Bly, for instance. What a wild style to be so successful as Bly with the way he plays. But you put him into chaotic situations and he's going to do better. Sometimes I see someone cheese Bly in a tournament and I'm just like, what are you doing? He knows exactly what situations, and you are not going to know. You are not. It definitely, it adds a lot, and I think it's important. If you just have macro bots going against each other, that's
I think because chaos is really order of a higher magnitude, right? It's just order, but like if I am a chaotic player and say like I've gotten my games casted in the past when I was like decent, and commentators would never know what's going on, or often would be like, whoa, what the hell is going on, right? Because they haven't seen it before. And I'm sure my opponents would also be like, what the fuck? Like, how do I prepare for CatZ is a thing that I've heard before, right? But the cool thing about the chaos that I created or that Bly creates is that for me or for Bly in that situation, it's not chaos. Because I understand that position. I understand that situation.
You get these weird spots. Yeah, there are pros like this, like SOS. He's a 2-time world champion on the back of creating chaos. He does the craziest things you've ever seen. And there's certain situations where people go into them against him. I'm like, this is his playground. You're in a base trade against SOS. That's the last thing you ever want to do. He gets into stuff like this all the time because the games are so crazy.
Yeah, he has 100 APM. Yeah, he's much more experienced. He sees the order in the chaos. I'm not sure why I said he has 100 APM casually. That's just what I say whenever I hear SOS. I think it's a compliment, though.
It is because he's a cognitive player, and
he really is.
It's important to have that range of different players that can compete at high levels. You don't want everyone to have to be, shoehorned into playing the macro games that Sarah was playing for a bit. It's great to see players actually strengthen themselves by diversifying. It's something I talk about a lot in my GSL cast, especially. It's almost trite at this point when Stats is playing. I'm like, guys, if he just took 2 Hoss builds and mix them in occasionally, he'd be the best player in the world. There's not even a question,
Yeah. Stats is kind of like the player that hasn't done that transition, that hasn't made that transition yet, that still could, because Cyril was that player for Sir, right? And now he's not. And Hero Marine even is a player that's known for Justice macro that's kind of starting to mix it up. So there's a lot of that going on, and it's really wonderful to see and be a part of that. And one last topic that I want to bring up here. I know you're tight on time. You have a stream that you start on time every single day, which is amazing.
Always
I wish I was as organized as you are. But
I told you, those habits and patterns, man. I follow them. They're the keys to success.
Yeah, I'm a little bit too chaotic for that, but I'm trying to be better at it. So thanks for the inspiration there. And do you consider yourself spiritual? Is the last? It's a big tangent, I suppose. It's a 180 here. But I find spirituality gets a little bit of a bad rep. I know you've read the Tao Te Ching. So how do you feel about that? What do you think spirituality is? And
So I don't consider myself spiritual, like really at all. But I do read some interesting philosophy that might make people think that, like the Tao Te Ching. I read all sorts of books like that, and I think that there's a lot of value from them. Like, philosophy is one of the main areas I'm trying to learn more StarCraft from, I guess. Like,
cool.
a lot of the stuff I read is because I want to be better at StarCraft. It's just kind of like that's the main passion. My main personal passion in my life is that. And so things like that I think really help. And I mean I've, for instance, specifically that book, the Tao Te Ching, I've read like how many times, I don't know, but I was reading it some last night. I just read a couple passages before bed and just like think about them and how they apply to things. And I think that to take a completely, how do I say this without it sounding woo woo or whatever that phrase is Joe Rogan uses. Like, you shouldn't just try to be like, well, this study says that, and so that's how I'm gonna do it. And it's like, no, I don't know. There's like a lot of wisdom and in ancient thought and stuff that you can take and read, and I feel like a lot of that stuff was lost in the modern world, and but there's still records of it, and you can read and be like, oh my god, this actually really applies.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Something that people are more okay with talking about is like the Art of War by Sun Tzu, right? Where it's like there's a lot of lessons in there that you can apply to StarCraft, but you can actually go even more philosophical, right? That's actually like a manual on the ideas and strategies of war. But if you go to something like the Tao Te Ching, where it's kind of talking in these fanciful ways, where it's going around the subject and pointing towards it, or pointing, this isn't it, that type of thing, you can still learn a lot from these things. And like, how, gosh, it's hard to speak about this. Like, I have
I can give you my take, and we can go from there if you'd like.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So I would say, first of all, like, spirituality obviously I think has a bad rep just from religion, right? Like, religion fed us or many of us, it wasn't for many of us where it was just kind of institutionalized, and you were told what it is that you should believe, and that's, believe it in with no real logical basis behind it, right? You couldn't really prove it. You're just supposed to have faith. I'm not for that. Now, the Tao Te Ching, I find, while it is written in fanciful ways, I would say, it is, from my perspective, a book of observations, right? It is, from my perspective, there's like, I read every page in the Tao Te Ching, and I'm like, yeah, like that makes sense, or I wish I could make sense of that, but for the most part, it's like, yeah, that makes sense, that's resounding. And the reason why it is so difficult to speak of, from my perspective, and I'll go to the definition of that Google has of spirituality, but definitions are just definitions, right? So Google would say that spirituality is something like the quality of being concerned with the human spirit as opposed to the material or physical things. And what I take from that is the opposition to material and physical things, which to me means something like spirituality is no different than consciousness, than to talk about being alive, than to talk about life. And life, while it is made of seemingly material objects, the experience of it is something else, something different that can't be put into words simply because it isn't words. It isn't definitions. And so from that perspective, I find that talking about spirituality or philosophy, if you would like to call it that instead, is incredibly important, because that's what life is. Yeah, I guess that would be my basic take on it.
When you kind of explain it like that or define it like that, then yeah, I would be interested in that. Like, something like the Tao Te Ching, right? Something I read somewhere, it was like this really smart thing. I might butcher it here, but it's something like, you can't actually say things that are true. Like, yeah, you can say things like that color is blue or whatever, but like when you're talking about like complex things, complex ideas, it's very hard to actually say the truth, because everything is fluid, everything's moving, everything's changing, and everything's too complex. And you see this even by idiots on Reddit or whatever, where like I'll be trying to say something and be like, well, that's not always true, there's these exceptions. Right. It's like, exactly. It's like, at some point you have to say something as a commentator, but it's hard to actually say something that's completely true, to describe something. You can't describe something fully because everything's too complex, but you can walk around it in a circle pointing at it, and you can say what it's not. Right. And I feel that Tao Te Ching is something like that, where it's like you're walking around the thing you're trying to describe, but you can't say it because there's not words that can actually say it. Even in English, which is, we've got so many words, and we have 10 different ways to say the same thing, but you still can't quite put your finger on what you're trying to say, which is what you're actually seeing happen to me too. I'm actually walking around what we're talking about, pointing at it.
But I think you hit the nail in the coffin.
Exactly what it is.
Yeah, but you said it. But I think you said it because it's fluid. That's the thing. It's not. Yeah. You had a tweet that I was very interested in. I commented on it privately rather than on your tweet feed. But it was about I believe thunder and lightning, and how even though they're the same phenomena, they have different names. right?
Yeah.
And so
Isn't that
we're
crazy?
actively engaged on trying to define things. And in the Tao Te Ching, for example, it says naming is the origin of all things. And what that means is, if you define something, then that's the origin of it. Because now we have two separate things, thunder and lightning, when we both know it's really the same thing. It's the same phenomena, right? And you could include the cloud that it came out of, and the charges of ions in that cloud, and the weather, and you could take everything as a part of that puzzle that eventually makes the thunder/lightning, right? And it's fluid. So from that perspective, I think that, like, in so long as we're using words, they're useful. They're extremely useful for communicating, and extremely useful for mundane aspects of science, and just in general for communicating. Really, it's the most important thing for communicating, right? You're wearing a hat, right? And that's a thing. But the truth of reality of existence, from my perspective, is that it's fluid, and that everything's kind of connected, and that it's a lot of thunder lightning type cases going around.
And this is something, and part of the reason why I'm so interested in this type of subject is because it actually translates perfectly into something like StarCraft or competition, where like you can read all these things about people hitting flow states. And one of the main things you can know is you can't write down how to get into that type of state because it's so fluid. And as soon as you try to write down how to get into it, that's the one time you can be guaranteed to not get into it, right? Like that is, and the thing is, you can extrapolate that to all of competition, where it's like, you can't just have a rule that every time you see this in StarCraft, you do this. Because first off, it can be used against you, and the game is too complex. There's too many things going on, and you can have these general ideas, but I find that a lot, where if I try to make a complete rule for myself, then I'll screw it up. Whereas I can have a feeling about something, and it's going to be much more accurate, even though it's more blurry at the same time. You know what I mean? Where
completely,
it's like, I can't put this idea I'm doing today into words, but I can feel what it is, and I'm pointing towards it and seeing how that goes.
Yeah, there's a conversation that we had many years ago that I also recall too, that I thought was a very cool thought or approach on this front. And I'll lead with another quick example. For example, if you take a tree, right, and you think of a tree, like many people, if you would ask them to draw a tree, would draw the top of the tree with its leaves, and then another person might go as far as like drawing the roots as well, right? And then if we're really observant, I mean, the tree is not without the nutrients in the soil, right, or without the sunlight, or without the wind. And the fruit that it produces is a combination of all of this, and then you eat it, and the fruit becomes you, right? It's fucking crazy. And I think to tie it into your thought and the conversation that we had many years ago, it's a realization that I think we were both making more or less at the same time, which is when you think of things in this fluid way, it becomes apparent that if you learn about one thing, you're kind of learning about all of it, right? It's like you can derive knowledge and understanding from just understanding the basic rules, rather than memorizing that's a tree, and that's it ends at the roots, right?
Yes. Yeah, everything will teach you about everything. Anything will teach you about everything. It's a weird thing that I continue to realize more and more, and I think that it's something that if you think a lot about it over a long period of time, you start to understand a little bit. And I don't pretend to understand it all the way or anything, but I think that some people will hear that and be like, okay, these guys are stupid. Like they're folk, or they don't know what they're talking about. But honestly, like, to again bring it to a finer point to make the point, like, to learn about StarCraft, I read about tennis, I read about basketball, I read about chess, I read about war, I read about philosophy. All of these things teach me so much. Once upon a time, I was really sad that we didn't have more, written analysis on StarCraft or stuff like that, right? And eventually it became almost kind of lonely because I'm like, well, who's going to write something in English that I don't already know about this game, right? Like I have to figure everything out myself almost. But then eventually I realized like, oh my God, if I've read so many like Japanese philosophy and stuff written by like Musashi and stuff, and it's like, oh my God, like all of this stuff is completely related. It really, it truly is. And the thing is, sometimes it's funny, I read some of this stuff and it's above my head and I put it away and I come back later. Like Tao Te Ching, there are several of what is there, like 78 little chapters in it or whatever. Half of them I don't get. And then I read through the book and I'm like, okay, this one doesn't make sense to me. And then I highlight, I read on Kindle, I highlight what does. And then, in the next 6 months, I go back and I've read 2 other books that have kind of expanded my brain, and then I'll read it again. And now 2 more passages make sense to me.
Oh, like, that must be so great, yeah.
Yeah, and stuff like that happens to me personally a lot, where like I'm not ready for certain things. Like I have tried to read The Art of War so many times, and I'm just like, I'm not ready for this, which is weird because everyone's like, oh, I read that, and that was amazing, and I'm like, guess you're smarter than me. I don't know, because I keep on reading other stuff and then coming back to it and be like, oh, okay, this is starting to make more sense to me now. Like I get it.
It's better that way, isn't it? Just to like be like know that you don't know is one of the greater blessings.
The thing is, I actually with StarCraft, I'm searching for truth in StarCraft. This is, and I would always rather just be like, no, I don't know. I don't like this is something I notice when people are talking. Okay, like someone will be like, you know what I mean?
Very assertive people sometimes.
And the one thing I've always made sure to do for the past several years now is if I don't know, like if I'm talking to Tasteless, he's like, you know what I mean? You know, it's just kind of a thing you say. At the end of the sentence, like, actually, no, I don't. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
You know, and I've never seen anyone else do that type of thing, but people should really practice not like letting people know that they don't know.
Yeah, that's how you learn.
Or like if you read something in a book, don't just try to force it into your understanding. Like when I read a certain passage from Art of War or Tao Te Ching or something, and it's not making sense to me, I'll think about it a little bit and be like, I guess I'll just come back to it.
Yeah.
Right? Like I want to actually understand. I want to actually know what's going on. That's what's beautiful about it. And it's not about reading the book and being like, the Art of War really helped my play. You know, it's like, well, no, that's not it. It's more like, yeah, it's more like, I'll figure this out in my own time, I guess.
Yeah. And just take the glimmers that we get and incorporate them. Brilliant. Well, we are hitting the allotted time for this episode, but it's been wonderful to have you on. Do you have any final words for your fans out there?
No, this is great, man. I always enjoy talking with you. Whenever we get to meet up in person at events and stuff, we have long talks like this oftentimes, and it's good stuff. You do good work, and thank you for coming on Pylon Show so much and having me on here. It was a great conversation, and one I'm sure we will continue until we are old men.
Oh, certainly, yeah. All right, then. Well, it's been wonderful. Thank you very much, and everyone watching, we'll see you next time.
Thanks.